Craig? All right. By now you may have all seen me standing up here, so it's your last chance to go help with coffee prep or something if you want to do that. Welcome everyone. I've been gone for a couple weeks, so it's good to see everybody and be back and jump right into teaching. So thank goodness for our YouTube live streaming recording, because I watched Jay's class anyway, so I at least kind of had an idea of what we were doing. But let's go ahead and start with the prayer, and then we'll kick off here. Dear God, we thank you for the sunshine, the promise of summer now that is here, for long days and cool mornings, for the crops that are growing. We thank you for family that's visiting, for the opportunities we have to travel, to perhaps take some vacation and have a break from our daily routine. Father, we thank you for this group, for the participation and the learning and the lessons. And Father, please bless our conversation today. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, so I did say conversation because, like a lot of the times that I do things, I don't want to be responsible for much. So it's up to a lot of you guys to help fill in the gaps. One of the things that I do nearly every year at this point is, for work, we have this conference, and it's for one of the software vendors that we use, and don't want to make a big deal out of it, but I'm an internationally recognized power user. Okay, so I participate and I lead one of the sessions, and my session is chat with the programmers, and it's my favorite one because I don't have to do anything. I just get up and kind of moderate the session. So I do the least amount of work and I still get to go for free. So I really like that. So let's try and do something like that today. So one of the things that really grabbed me about the summer series when Jay emailed me about it was the concept of insiders and outsiders. That's a topic that's come up over the last few years more and more, I think, and it's something I've thought about. It's something we talk about with things as simple as like the announcements. You know, if I say, and we're going to Bill's house, well, who's Bill? Bill who? There's 3 Bills here, and we might all know because we know that, oh yeah, it's the Schultzes and we're going there. But if you're new or visiting, you don't know. So we're using insider language to communicate. That came up recently with the camp, a couple of things with camp, with the dinner and then the work days. It's like, okay, there's a core group of us, the insiders, that have a long history of camp. And if I say, hey, camp work day, that group knows what I mean. The outsiders, the new people who maybe have never been to camp, there's camp? Where's camp? What's camp? What are they talking about? And so even the language that we use identifies insiders and outsiders. And it's one thing I kind of, maybe this is my personality, but sometimes it's easy to almost perceive yourself as an outsider and say, well, I just haven't really done much lately. I kind of feel like I'm not in the mix. I don't really know what's going on. But somebody else might say, dang, Chad does everything around there. Chad's always up doing something or doing. And so in our own mind, our perception is we're one thing, but somebody else sees us as something else. And so I think it's important to kind of be realistic and self-reflective on that. So I don't want to get too far from the actual lesson matter today, but I do want to quickly ask, when it comes to faith or church experience, when have you felt like an insider or an outsider? Bill, Mr. Schultz, Mr. Bill Schultz, everybody, if you, let me introduce everybody by their full name. That's the assumptions we make, yeah.
No, you know, we're all insiders and outsiders of different aspects of our life. But related to this, when I first came here because we have friends, but going to a new situation, they're all looking at me and us. Who are they?
Right.
Yeah. Luckily, because of the character of this congregation, it's not too long before you get to be an insider.
Okay.
You know, because this is one of the. Yeah, when you first come in, you know, you're seeing all these people running around and shaking hands.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not part of that, you're very much an outsider in your own mind.
Right.
And in their minds too, because maybe they want to go acquainted with you. There's always an approach.
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm-hmm.
approach you.
Right. Right. Well, and like, I'm busy talking to people I already know. It's hard to break away from that and go talk to somebody else. Dan. Mm-hmm. Mm. Right. Right. Yeah, Randy. Mr. Hudson.
And for example, when I lived 20 minutes away,
Right.
I loved being able to, come help Chuck Tarpley do little chores around here or whatever. And I could afford to spend some time
Right.
and my own money. Now suddenly I'm moved 45 minutes away, and it changed everything. And certainly there's some feelings of being an outsider because I'm not available
Right.
to spend the time.
Right.
And it's the same in my family or at my work. It always boils down to the
Location
time that I'm
matters,
willing to
right?
dedicate. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I really felt that when I lived next door and then I moved 2 miles away. I mean, just a totally different situation. Yeah, Val.
I'm definitely an insider. I've been coming here over a year, and everybody has been nice and welcoming. And Dennis helps me with some chore things, and the same with Alan. It's good.
As soon as somebody helps you move, you know you're an insider.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I think it's safe to say, we've all had these experiences. We all have this perspective at times. One that's not church related I was going to mention is if you ever go someplace for vacation or something and you're there for more than a day or two, you start to try and figure out like the politics of that area, and you see like the election signs, or like I was out of town last weekend and they're having a mayoral race and I saw 2 different names. I'm like, one's like a new path forward and one was something else, and I was like, do we want a new path forward? I don't know. Like, what's the situation here? But to me, it was just names on a sign, and so I definitely felt like an outsider like that. So in today's lesson or story, it's hard to imagine someone who could be viewed as a bigger outsider than our heroine. There's a tip. It's a heroine. But the reality might turn out to be different. one of the reasons I raised my hand for this lesson was I have such vivid associations and memories of this in Sunday school as a kid. And so it's just a really rich story. So when I saw it on the list, I raised my hand for this one. So some context to start off with. So we are doing Rahab today in the Spies. So now you know. But basically, so to kind of set the stage, so Israel has moved into Canaan. They're starting their process of kind of conquering the land and taking the promised land that God has promised them. And one of the first stops is Jericho. And I am like blasting out here. So who in Scripture surprised you by turning to God?
Thief on the cross.
Okay, that's a great one. I hadn't thought about that one. Thief on the cross, Randy said. Who's surprised? Who's a surprising person that turned to God?
Mary Magdalene.
Mary Magdalene. Okay.
Centurion.
The centurion. Okay.
Well,
Paul. Thank you. I have that one. Matthew, tax collector. So when I was a teen, one of the things that kind of became a deal for us was there was a story about, I think it was like a VBS type of situation, and the teacher is saying, who's the guy that, he died on the cross and he rose and he saved you, and kids were just like, they didn't want to say anything, and so finally the one kid says, Jesus? And so we call that the brown fuzzy squirrel question, because nobody wants to say the obvious answer, like what goes up a tree, collects nuts, and hibernates in the winter? It's a squirrel, right? Like, you can say squirrel. So Rahab is a surprising character who turns to God. So let's see if this works. Animation on my slide right there. All right, so let's see, how do you do the laser on this? So Jericho's up here. Okay, I'm checking all these things off the list here. So I love Gibbs' pictures from Israel, right? When he does the lessons and he's been to places. This is not Jericho. It is a wall. Okay? Yes, it is a stone wall. Why isn't it the picture of Jericho? Those walls came tumbling down, right? So, but it probably could have looked something like that. And the city of Jericho itself was probably something like this, where it started as one size and they built a wall around it, and then what happens? Everybody wants to live at that protected city. So then they crowd up against the walls, and so then they decide to build a second set of walls. And so eventually it kind of became a multi-walled location. Oh, spoiler, go back. All right. All right, so Jericho was a fortified city, and let's see. So we're gonna read now Joshua chapter 2, and I need 3 people to read. We're gonna read the whole chapter here, so let's break it up. Randy, 1 through 7.
Joshua chapter
2. Somebody else. Be brave.
I'll do this.
Bill, 8 through 13. One more.
Lori knows that.
All right, Dan, 14 through 24. You didn't raise your hand, but I called on you. All right, so go ahead, Randy.
Then Joshua, son of Nun, secretly sent 2 spies from
You can say it. Shit.
Shittim.
Yeah.
Glasses. Sorry. Go look over the land, he said, especially Jericho. So they went and entered the house of of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there. The king of Jericho was told, look, some of the Israelites have come here tonight to spy out the land. So the king of Jericho sent this message to Rahab. Bring out the men who came to you and entered your house, because they have come to spy out the whole land. But the woman had taken the two men and hidden them. She said, yes, the men came to me, but I did not know where they had come from. At dusk, when it was time to close the city gate, the men left. I don't know which way they went. Go after them quickly, you may catch up with them. But she had taken them up to the roof and hidden them under the stalks of flax she had laid out on the roof. So the men set out in pursuit of the spies on the road that leads to the fords of the Jordan. And as soon as the pursuers had gone out, the gate was shut.
Before the men lay down, she came up to them on the roof and said to the men, I know that the Lord has given you land, and that the fear of you has fallen upon us, and that all the inhabitants of the land melt away before you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the two kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom you devoted to destruction. And as soon as we heard it, our hearts melted, and there was no spirit left in any man because of you. For the Lord your God, he is God in the heavens above and on the earth beneath. Now then, please swear to me before the Lord that I have dealt kindly with you, and you also will deal kindly with my father's house, and give me a sure sign that you will come save alive my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them.
Our lives for your lives, the men assured her. If you don't tell what we are doing, we will treat you kindly and faithfully when the Lord gives us the land. So she let them down by a rope through the window, for the house she lived in was part of the city wall. She said to them, go to the hills so that pursuers will not find you. Hide yourselves there 3 days until they return, and then go on your way. Now the men had said to her, this oath you made us swear will not be binding on us unless when we enter the land, you have tied the scarlet cord of the window through which you let us down, unless you have brought your father and mother, your brothers, and all your family into your house. If any of them go outside your house into the street, their blood will be on their own heads. You will not be responsible. As for those who are in the house with you, their blood will be on our head if a hand is laid on them. But if you tell what we are doing, we will be released from the oath you made us swear. Agreed, she replied. Let it be as you say. So she sent them away, and they departed, and she tied the scarlet cord in the window. When they left, they went into the hills and stayed there 3 days until the pursuers had searched all along the road and returned without finding them. Then the two men started back. They went down out of the hills, forded the river, and came to Joshua son of Nun and told him everything that had happened to them. They said to Joshua, the Lord has surely given the whole land into our hands. All the people are melting in fear because of us.
All right, thank you. So first off, verse 1 has one of my favorite Bible jokes, and that is, who is the only person in the Bible without parents? Joshua, son of Nun. Yes. All right. So Rahab was a Canaanite woman and a prostitute, an outsider by all measure. What are some examples of how she, as an outsider, would have been seen by the Israelite spies?
For starters, she was a prostitute.
Okay. Her profession?
Yeah.
Prostitute. Okay, what else?
Being female wasn't a great big asset back then.
A woman, yeah. I mean, that may be the biggest kind of issue for their perception there.
What about the location of her house?
On the city wall?
Pretty handy.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, in some, like, her physical location was almost outside, right?
Yeah,
She wasn't part of the inner city. She was on the outside of the city.
Canaanite.
Canaanite, yeah, she was one of God's people. Okay. And isn't it interesting how the story is structured? Because we don't actually see the spies meet Rahab. All of a sudden, somebody's ratted them out, and they come to find them, and she has already hidden them. She's taken them in. She's kind of watching over them, but we don't see any of that. So I think that's an interesting part of the story, that some things happen that we don't see or have knowledge of. All right. Rahab's confession of faith. I know that the Lord has given you the land. And let's see. And that the fear of you has fallen upon us, and that all the inhabitants of the land melt away before you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the 2 kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, to Sihon and Og, whom you have devoted to destruction. All right, so word is getting out, and she believes it. She has heard and believed. So, all right. So this is a discussion question. Find your neighbor, and 2 questions. Why was Rahab an outsider drawn to God's people? And what role did the 2 Israelite spies play in the encounter?
One more time. What?
Okay. Why was Rahab an outsider drawn to God's people? And what role did the 2 Israelite spies play in the encounter? So why was Rahab drawn to God's people, and what responsibility or what role did the 2 spies have?
The first one's fear.
I'll get you.
All right. Always good to hear some lively conversation going on, and then to end it. So what did you hear? Why was Rahab drawn to God's people?
Fear.
Fear. Okay.
Her recognition of the power.
Right. She tells right there, like, you've already started destroying these people. You've devoted cities to destruction.
Like Bill said, they've been hearing this story for 40 years. It's a couple generations.
That's a good
People
point.
ain't talking
40
about
years.
this stuff.
Yeah. You kind of forget about the 40-year aspect of this.
It's common knowledge.
Right.
What's going on.
Right. What else?
Sylvia mentioned also in respect to that God must have been working on her heart.
Yeah, let's not forget God in this story. Like, God was working on her heart. Yeah, that's a critical part of it, obviously.
And here's a woman that called the shots on what happens in her family.
Yeah, the woman.
The woman is in charge.
Right.
She's a leader with
Right. Right. So, and then what role did the spies have in the encounter?
They were representatives of Yahweh and Israel.
Right. Well, yeah, they were representing both Yahweh and the Israelites.
You know, you mentioned that we don't have a lot about how they first met her or get into the house, but I kind of think, Randy and I were talking about what spies do. You know, they run under the radar there. That's probably the reason it isn't written down is because nobody really knows. But also, you know, spies have certain missions that they have to carry out, and one of those was to gather intel about the city and the defenses and all that. And she probably saw what they were doing, or knew what they were there for. And that's why she said, hey, all right, you guys, you know, I'll help you out, but make sure my family stays safe. And so she was pretty shrewd, too. You know,
Right.
She wasn't, and again, that points out to a woman of some substance that decided that I can see the way the wind's blowing here, and they're going to be back with an army eventually.
Right.
And I want my family to be safe.
She's smart.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Savvy. Yeah.
But I think the influence from the men was just that. They probably told her what's going on.
Right. Donna?
I was thinking that she may have been really interested when she knew that these men had not come for the services that usually were provided there. So there was something already very different about them.
Right. They weren't interested in her as a prostitute. That's a great point. And I think everybody's getting at these three things that I kind of wrote down here. The spies did not convert Rahab, but they listened to her, they trusted her, and they honored the covenant that they made. So they treated her as a person and not as a woman in that society. All right. So does this teach us anything about our experiences with non-believers now? Brown fuzzy squirrel answer. Yes.
Respect.
Maybe we should respect people. We should give them like some credit. We should. Everybody has worth, and everybody's had a life that we don't know about sometimes, and we should respect that.
Well, that should teach us that God is everywhere.
Yeah, God is everywhere. Yeah, that's a
And
good.
that, like the spies, we are representatives to
Right.
those people, to those outsiders.
Right.
as well.
Right.
And I think that's important. We have a responsibility to carry God with us wherever we go and whoever we deal with.
But taking on the role of the spies is like literally the ambassadors for God and the nation of Israel. Yeah. All right. So one thing I mentioned was that Sunday school kind of perspective, and these kind of images are like seared into my brain from talking about this story as a 6-year-old, 7-year-old, and you can't quite see it, but there is a scarlet cord in his left hand, and so there's that one. So why is the outsider drawn to God? Rahab had heard about God's mighty deeds. God's reputation matters, so they had seen that God had been with his people for 40 years. He was leading them into the promised land. Outsiders are drawn by what they hear and see. And again, I think Rahab demonstrates that she was responding to the story she'd heard, and even maybe now immediately with the actions of the spies. So she had seen that, yeah.
Looking at that, it reminds me how that applies today. People are drawn to Christians because of their walk, what they hear, what Christians say,
Right.
how they live.
Right.
They also could be forced away.
Oh, well, I was going to say for good and for bad. Not always in a positive way, unfortunately. Yeah. And we're going to talk some more about that in the next few minutes, I think. All right, let's go to chapter 6, and we're gonna read about, as Paul Harvey used to say, the rest of the story. Now that is an insider comment because people like India never heard Paul Harvey, and, so she's just sitting there saying, "Huh? What?" So India, see, this is kind of great.
What's the radio?
All right. Yeah.
I know it's not part of the point, but I just was struck with the scarlet cord. How that-
We're gonna get there.
How
We're gonna
that's,
get there.
you gotta listen.
Yeah, we're gonna get there. All right, so verse 22. But to the two men who had spied out the land, Joshua said, "Go into the prostitute's house and bring out from there the woman and all who belong to her, as you swore to her." So the young men who had been spies went in and brought out Rahab and her father and her mother and brothers and all who belonged to her. And they brought out all of her relatives and put them outside the camp of Israel. And they burned the city with fire and everything in it. Only the silver and gold and the vessels of bronze and of iron they put into the treasury of the house of the Lord. But Rahab the prostitute and her father's household and all who belonged to her, Joshua saved alive. And she has lived in Israel to this day because she hid the messengers whom Joshua sent to spy out Jericho. So, happy ending, I guess. I mean, the town of Jericho may not think so, but Rahab's family did. But one thing I think is interesting about this, and you'll catch this every so often, is it's like a contemporary telling. Like, the person writing this or telling this, they still live among us. They did live among us for a long time back in that old time. It's like, no, we know these people, they're still part of us. This is a contemporary event, not something of the past. So Rahab's confession, we talked about that. She recognized God's power over all. She trusted the spies, and then the spies came through. But not only the spies, but Joshua as well. So the spies had made this commitment, this oath on behalf of the nation of Israel and God's people, and Joshua recognized that and then remembered her.
God kept that part of the wall standing.
Right, yeah, so they were able to actually do it, go and rescue them and bring them out. And so the fact that it was a promise by God's people, played out to fruition. So now we're going to get to Randy's point about the scarlet cord. So what might the scarlet cord remind us of, and the other parts of that story with staying inside and having your family with you? Well, Passover, the Exodus story, right? So instead of a scarlet cord, they used blood, right? But they also say, hey, anybody that's not within those walls, they're fair game. Again, another allusion to the Exodus story, and that the safety was within God's protection, whether that be the scarlet cord or the blood on the mantle. Any other similarities between the two stories? They had to be ready to go at a moment's notice. Basically, they had to be backed up and ready to go. And when time came, They vamoosed immediately. They didn't say, oh wait, let's go get all of our stuff and go find everybody. It's like, it's time to get out of here because bad stuff's about to happen. So through this story, we see that God can redeem outsiders, and that our role is to bring God's promises to those outside the camp. Okay, so if we put ourselves in the place of the Israelites now, where they used and brought in Rahab's family and made them part of them. So let's see. So the two spies honored their promise. We talked about that. So how can we be people who bring outsiders to God today? Oh, hey guys, there's the Jericho, walls of Jericho coming down. They got the horns. This is more like the Bible version I would have seen as a kid.
So I take a credit for that.
Yeah.
You talked about how we, I don't remember how you worded it. Say it one more time, please.
How can we be people who bring outsiders to God today?
I just was tying it back to that scarlet rope again. Anybody that was invading, it's practical. Everybody would have known what that was, or they would have noticed it in the same way that when you're talking to a stranger and they're wearing a cross, you notice it, right? It's very practical. It wasn't some weird new voodoo thing. It was practical. And I think regularly, I love these little gems of practical application of the word. So how do we do? Well, the same way as always. In Ephesians it says to make it your ambition to lead a quiet life, work with your hands and mind your own business, to be a good guy.
Right.
That's attractive to people.
Right.
We talk about people being attracted to Christians because of self-control, peace, and love, and kindness.
The fruits of the Spirit.
The fruits of the Spirit.
Yeah.
And I don't think it has to be any more complicated. It has to be practical. It has to be useful.
Right.
A hammer with 93 attachments is not useful.
Right.
And so I think that us as Christians, we have to keep it simple.
We need to be hammers.
And we have to keep what the word says. It's very simple.
Yeah.
And it's
Right.
repetitious,
Right.
but it's reassuring and it's authentic.
It's worked for 2,000 years. We get in the way. Yeah.
I'm thinking about my last year at Caldwell High School. I taught the last chance kids. They were kids that had been set fires around the school. They were in gangs. They wore ankle bracelets. They were tough kids. And when there would be one explode in the classroom, I would stop and pray. I'd pray silently, but I prayed a lot. Because I needed God. And I needed to know how to handle those situations.
Right.
The kids became very tender towards me. Even one kid would hug me often, and one of my students said, "Miss, you don't know, he's the devil outside this classroom." But they were tender and
So recognizing that God is
Well,
needed.
he
God
was-
God is the only one that can redeem the situation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I don't know that it was me praying.
Right.
Well, I think, they
Right.
saw me praying, but God was sure with me
Yeah.
there and with those students.
Yeah. Dennis?
Well, I like Randy's word authentic. We can't be fake.
Right.
People will see right through that. And
One of the things I kind of read into this, maybe it's fair, maybe it's not, is like there was relationship being built before any talk of salvation happened. Like they didn't just go to them and say, it wasn't the spies making the proposition to Rahab. Like, if you do this, we'll save you. No, they built a trusting relationship, and then God entered into it, as part of, now she had known about God and we know that, but it felt more authentic in the way it occurred rather than just, if you don't, look out, like God's coming for you. So, and it wasn't like heavy-handed, maybe is more built.
I think a lot of us need to think about when we deal with people on a regular basis, and we have this in our mind. Are we aware? Do we have our radar on, so to speak? But I think we need to look back at how we personally came to God. What that really, some of us grew up in the church, some of us didn't.
Right.
But we all, at some point, we came to the relationship with God that says, I have to do something about this. And if you start looking at yourself and your own personal experience, and then project that out to see, well, I wonder if this person can have that kind of experience, or this kind of whatever.
Right.
I had an interesting, this is years ago, but a friend of mine, we went to a football game. We're sitting in the stands, and there's thousands of people there. It's a big deal. And my friend, who was a Christian, he said, how many of these people do you think, we're looking at thousands of people in this, how many of these people do you think follow Jesus? And I went, oh, I don't know.
Based on the latest statistics.
Yeah, and honestly, it changed my view of that. All of a sudden, I thought, the harvest is ready.
Right.
And that made a difference to me.
Change of perspective.
But we always look inward, and we understand, we remember how we came to a full realization of who Jesus is and why. And you think that, well, these other people can do that too, because it happened to me, it happened to you, it happened to my friends, it happened to everybody that's here. And I'm thinking, why don't we apply that same thing when we deal with people on the outside?
Right.
They have a need for that, and we can help them with that, hopefully. But you're right. A lot of people we just ignore or disregard. You look at a crowd of people, and all you see is a crowd of people. But what it is individuals. And most people who are outside the church, in my experience, that I've taught or spoken to, have been, the relationship is always, as you mentioned, establishing a relationship. Okay, it's a one-on-one thing, really. And I think that's something that we sometimes miss, because we're used to hearing the word in here when we're all together.
Right.
But out there, we are the word.
Right.
It's the guy you're talking to or the gal you're talking to.
Yeah. Well, and unfortunately, I think there is an insider-outsider kind of idea, and it feels like there's almost like, if you look at rings on bullseye, like, okay, this group of outsiders, yeah, we're interested. Like, we'll make them an insider. They check all the boxes. They're close enough to us. But you start getting out further and further on the bullseye, on the target. They're a lost cause. They're never gonna work their way into the bullseye. And Dan. Oh, right. Okay.
Well, no, I'll say something. Though.
Yeah.
It just reminded me of something that Bruce has said that really struck me. That is what Bill said. The harvest is plentiful. It's the workers that are few. When we look at the opposites, not many out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Perspective switch. Yeah. Christine.
I don't know how to say this really well, so bear with me. But when those two spies went in to Jericho, they were doing God's work. They were not doing they did not have an agenda except God's. They were there. They did not go in, like you just said, looking at the bullseye people.
Mm-hmm.
They were there to do God's bidding, His will. And I think if they had gone there with their own agenda, it wouldn't have turned out the same.
Right.
It's like when Bill was talking about looking at the crowd. Well, we categorized, those are for this team, those are for that team.
And when they look at each other, they don't see each other as
Right.
human beings.
Right.
They see each other as belonging to this group or that group.
Friends or enemies. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think in this day and age, we have to be extremely careful that we are doing God's bidding. We are speaking as Jesus would have us speak, and
Right.
not as a member of our
Right.
group
Yeah.
or team.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. But I'm glad you mentioned that the two spies were on a mission from God, because it made me, I can finally throw in my Blues Brothers. They're on a mission from God, right?
What I was going to say is, like, on the previous slide, it was talking about integrity. I think, you know, a lot of people are apprehensive about getting to know God at all because they feel like it's a vendetta, like, to convert people. And they didn't try to convert her. They were just there doing what they were instructed.
Right.
Exactly.
You know,
Authentic.
they trusted her.
Yeah,
Just
integrity.
yeah.
Yeah.
They built a rapport
Yeah.
with her, and they followed through. And if we did
Yeah.
that with other people, I think people would be a lot less apprehensive and not feel like, you know, having a
Amen.
really
Yeah.
like force.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
join
we're-
our club.
I mean, I know.
We're past time, but you know, I think authenticity is something that we're missing in general, right? I mean, everything with influencers and social media, and if you see any of that, especially for our younger generation, I mean, I'm having to have conversations like that with Jonathan, like, that's not real. Like, that video that you just watched is not real. Like, they probably filmed it 8 times to get it right, and they don't really live that way, and they changed the color saturation on the video. We need authenticity, right? And we can be authentic to people with our story and with the story of God. And that would be my encouragement to you to reach out to outsiders with authenticity.
Fail Factory is legit and dude perfect. You gotta practice to make perfect.
Right. Right.
One quarter shot.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your participation.
Thanks, Chad.
Well, thank you.